Hey, you still working? You hear me?
I'm still here. I'm still here.
All right, perfect. So, Kimber, I obviously have known you about a week and a half now, but I feel like we're like two kindled spirits. We get on very well. And the reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you today was really I had two questions for you. I think the biggest first part is I have been in sales leadership for 15 years, but I am naive to the problems that are outside of my bubble. And now as a CEO and a founder of a freelance company where I have freelance employees, I have to be more aware of the world that I live in. And so the first question I wanted to ask you and talk about was, can you perhaps share some examples of things that where equality and diversity and inclusion have impacted your career?
Oh wow, that's a big question.
Yeah.
That could be more than a 2-minute response because just over the last 20 years, it seems like more companies now are having to accept individuals who fall into those certain categories, whether they are disabled, whether they are protected veteran or LGBTQ, any of that nature, right? They're having to compete with other companies, looking for the right talent. So your question is pretty broad, just the fact that over the last 20 years, it wasn't accepted to be out and about as a lesbian female professional, right? I mean, I wasn't able to be open. So the challenges were tough. The environment was tough when I first started.
That right there just sickens me, just as a side note. Like the fact that you had struggles because of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
That right there just like it sent shivers down my spine. Like it's horrible.
It is horrible, and it's not any different than the coworker next to me who was Black.
Right.
Or the coworker across from me that was actually Hispanic. Not from Mexico, but I should say Spanish. She was Spanish, from Spain.
Yeah.
So it's not any different than that. We were all treated differently, and the majority of the individuals that were treating us not appropriately was the male leadership.
Yeah. Male white males in particular.
Yes,
right?
correct. So now let's fast forward to today, right? Black Lives Matter, lots of protests, lots of hate. So now I'm seeing more and more companies creating positions as a global director or global management for inclusion and diversity under the HR umbrella. How are companies handling that?
Yeah.
Right? Because there is still so much hatred, no matter what category you fall into. And I still experience that. I experienced it in my last job. But it's still out there. It just still is out there, and you just gotta, educate the employees.
Yeah.
And not just employees that fall under leadership. The leadership has to be a role model for the rest of the employees. Like there are several different manufacturers that fall into my portfolio that I work with on throughout my 20 years, that they have a no asshole policy. Yeah. And if you fall into that at any given time in your tenure there, they will let you go.
Yeah.
No questions asked, right? And so more companies are doing that. Whether or not they're following that no asshole policy, and that's what it's really called. It's really called a no asshole policy.
Yeah, LinkedIn had the same thing.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I still experience it. It's not as bad, but it's still out there, and it's just based on ignorance, right? I mean, it just really is. And does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Ignorance to me is like just fear of the unknown as well. People are ignorant.
Sure.
The other piece of it, though, unfortunately, I've heard this as well, which is just unbelievable to me. But there is a clear evidence that females get paid less than males in their career, and you know, like my co-founder is my wife. The first employee we have is our chief people officer. Both female employees that I would not be where I am today, or this company will not grow without them. And Jamie is unbelievable at what she does. Like, but to me, like, that doesn't even come into my head. Like, you pay everyone based on merit. Like, but tell me about that. Have you experienced that at all? Or has there been?
I have never experienced that.
That's great. Well, that's a good start.
Yeah. And I think it's because I'm educated about that. I was even educated about the value of who I am and what I can bring to a company 20 years ago. Now, I see women who fall into that category where they're cautious about representing their value, and companies will try to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's unfortunate. You know, but I have never experienced that in all my works.
Okay, good. So then the last question I had was, I've been in sales for 16 plus years. I've been a sales manager for 10 plus years. Okay. But this is my first time actually driving the car. And I want to get it right. Like, you know, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it once and I'm going to do it right. Right. So what things could I do that maybe I don't think about, that I can make sure I am doing things right for all elements of diversity, inclusion, fairness, equality?
If you haven't been educated on hiring practices for inclusion and equality, I would take the classes. There are tons of classes, even on your former employee, about what's the right way to hire that, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to start off as a startup company and as a leader of that, already having a bullseye on your back that you're not including individuals from all areas.
Yeah.
Right? So I think if you have not done that, that would be a great start, because there are things in there that I wasn't even aware of, even when I do fall into that category, right? That could actually help me in my role.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that would be a first great start. And then, you know, reach out to your friends and family and the network who fall into those categories and ask them what you could do to better represent yourself as a leader in your organization, to represent them in your company.
Yeah. I love that. Ironically, I took a class about 2 years ago on diversity, inclusion, hiring. And the biggest outcome for me was that even things like your job posting, just because I wrote it, means that, like, the perspective means it's indicating like certain, I'm hiring certain people that are mirroring myself. And I didn't realize that like even like little things like the wording in the job posting impacts in such a big way. So that was a huge change. But I do agree with you. Like, there's hundreds of courses out there, and I want to make sure that I continuously learn. I think that, like, there's things that are coming out and changing all the time, and I firmly believe in that. So I'm definitely going to do that. I think the other thing that, you know, it's all one thing to talk the talk, but it's another thing to walk the walk. But at the same time, there's this, I don't want to hire a female because she's a female freelancer. Like, I want to hire the best freelancer for the job. And so I have to make sure that there is a balance on all pieces of it before that last piece, which is like hiring the actual freelancer.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong with that.
Yeah, no, that you're exactly right. But you've got to have matrix in place that help you establish who the best candidate is going to be. And you got to think of it as not a male or female. You got to think of it as not black or white, gay or straight. You got to think of their strengths. And that's really hard to do in, you know, our area right now, because, you know, our conferences are based on Zoom. So you are going to look at them. You are going to see their mannerisms. You are going to see that. But you have to really educate yourself on putting that stuff aside and saying, is this position going to be filled by this person successfully or this person. So you have to,
Yeah.
you have to put some matrix in.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what's interesting to me, and what I've evolved from in the last 3 weeks is when I started this, I was like, okay, I'm going to get freelancers that I know, like, okay, salespeople that work with me, freelancers that I know. And now I'm starting to expand it out, and actually we're going to probably get to close on 100 freelancers by the end of September, and which is mind-numbingly scary at the same time. But now we're at the point where, yeah, the matrix becomes more important. And actually, just because you've worked for me before doesn't mean that you're the first on the list to get the next freelancer gig. Like, it's got to be the right person for the right gig, and that
Agreed.
and so that's absolutely something that we need to build out in the back end and keep an eye and monitor as well.
Yeah. And you have to, when you're doing your matrix too, and applying that individual per consultant gig, you have to really understand your end user, right? Your client, right? Get to understand what their personality is like, understand what they like to do outside of work, right? And you got to measure those factors, or those matrix into play too, because you don't want somebody who doesn't have a personality, but this guy has a very large personality, right?
Right. Yeah, I look at it as I look at it as matchmaking, right? And to me, the freelancers and the clients, they've got to match. It's got to be equal, right? So, like for yourself, for example, like, I would put you in with certain gigs, but I wouldn't necessarily put you in with an industry that you wouldn't know. But if there was an IT security company, based on your experience, you're going to be very high on that list. And then the other thing though is, to protect my freelancers, and again, it's very tricky because there's a difference between freelancers and employees, but to protect the freelancers, which are, my product ultimately, we have to make sure that we live by our rules. And so I've already said from day one, like, if there's a client that I feel or I have heard that they are treating their employees badly, or if there's not equality in the company, I am not going to put a freelancer in that position, because that's just unfair on them right from day one. And I've got to stand by that, and I've got to be firm with that, because even if there's money being thrown at me, you've got to respect the product first, and the product in our case is the freelancer.
Yeah, and that's going to be hard because you're starting out, right? You want to build that pipeline, you want to build that revenue, but if you can stay with that mantra and that mission, good karma is going to come right back at you, right?
And
when you talk to your freelancers, you need to tell them too that, I'm going to place you in a safe environment. Right? You are my product. And so if I find a client that might fit you really well, but I don't want to bring them on board because it's not safe. Right. Yeah. So, and they're going to respect you tremendously.
There's also another thing there that you just kind of alluded to, which is, I need my freelancers to feel like they can trust me. And so there are going to be times where I think it's a safe environment, and I'm going to put them in a safe environment, and I'm not going to know, like, especially now we're in a world of remote. So I need the freelancers to come to me and be like, hey, I have to tell you, like, this was wrong. Like, this was bad and this was wrong. Because then I can pull the plug, and then I can say, okay, like, right, we're done with that client. But the freelancers need to trust me from day one that I'm going to do that, and they can come to me with these things.
Right. And that's hard these days, right? Because you don't have a physical presence with them. You're not sitting across from them and can read their entire emotions and everything like that. I mean, so that's why you have to build that branding, that personal brand of yourself, where your company is loyal, right? So I was just looking yesterday, and this is a good point. I was just looking yesterday on LinkedIn for individuals who helped me embrace my personal brand. Who can get it out there stronger. And let the people know, and then to let comments of people who know you agree with that, right? So almost kind of like a recommendation, your reference type document. But so that's what I was looking at yesterday, was saying, okay, can I hire somebody as a personal brander to get me out in the market faster, stronger, and then have people who've known me for the last 20 years and have worked with me, you know, agree with whatever this marketer person would do for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, that's all you got is your brand.
Yeah. Right. Right. And like, what's the rule? It takes a year to build the brand and a minute to destroy the brand.
Oh yeah. Like that. Oh yeah.
So fingers crossed, right? I mean, like the whole point of doing these conversations, and I'm doing several of these conversations, is, you know, one, I want to learn, and I openly admit I don't know all the answers, but two, I want to be held accountable. You know, if this video goes out onto social media and then 3 months later, someone says to me, a freelancer says to me, hey, like, there was a problem with this client, or the client says to me, hey, there was a problem with this freelancer, I need to be held accountable. Right? Yeah. And that's the only way I can build my brand, is if I do what I say.
I would agree with you. And then have proof of that, right? Yeah. You have to have proof of that. And then that proof has to have been executed too. Yeah. Right. So if it does happen that you have had let go of a company because of, you know, their ethics or whatever, you have to have proof that you stood your ground and you protected your employees. Yeah. Right. And that's a verbal statement video of yourself saying, you know, hey, look, this did happen. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And it goes both ways, right? Like we can filter and we pride ourselves on like filtering out our freelancers. Like not everyone gets into our network, but right. You can only filter so much. To your point, we're on Zoom right now, right? You know, if I hire someone as a freelancer and for some reason they are an obnoxious human being, like I'm not going to know about that from like Zoom. And so yeah. it has to be both ways.
Yeah.
This was super useful. Thank you so much for teaching me, really is the best way of describing it.
Well, let me tell you this. And I love speaking with you because you're so empathetic. You're wanting to build your company up and you're wanting to do it right. And you're trying to research every resource or tool available out there to be successful. And you're not hitting the pedal to the ground and then having to backpedal and fix some of these early on mistakes. So I applaud you for that, because I know when you have a startup, you're like, yes, let's go. But you want to do it properly, right? And so I commend you for reaching out to figure out what's the best tools in your tool belt to be successful right out of the gate. And so I admire that.
I appreciate that. You should know that there's 24 hours in a day, and there's probably, you know, at least a couple of hours a day where I'm like, I want to do it right. And at least a few hours a day, I'm going to be honest, where I'm like, I need to be selling. I need to get clients. I need to get this work.
Oh, yes. Yes. But the continuing education that you are reaching out to, you know, your network to learn will be very fruitful for you. So
fingers crossed. Hopefully you and I have a long relationship and work together and
that'd be great.
Make a lot of money for each other and win.
Exactly, right. And learn. So
yeah.
Stuff.
All right. I thank you again. I'm going to stop.